silly, ridiculous, a waste of time. They didn't want that's why they were so successful. That's why they got away.
I've made a living in very dangerous.
Integrated home together.
Dianne Andrews in black and white.
Hello, this is Fuji Totes. I'm making a little video for you to see how the pillow works with the doggy in it. I have driven all the way to Las Vegas, Nevada, and taken Fuji and my other dog, my multiple, with me with their meds, their leashes, their water cup, and whatever. And one pack, a couple of packs of food are in the bottom of this. Even with all that in the bottom, he can still lay here and feel nothing. You see him sitting down on it, he can still do that with all the things in there.
Thanks for joining us today, whether you're in the audience somewhere joined, or whether you're on Facebook Live, or whether you catch us on the internet on all our social media channels. You can catch us at 3 o'clock on KZUP in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I've been off on sabbatical. I won't call it sick, but I've had a toxic reaction to zinc. I haven't done a show in 4 months. So this is the first time back in the studio, and I'll have to put some pictures on this on what this studio looked like Friday and what it even looked like last night. And I want to give a shout out to Judah Isier, to Matt, to Nin Kyles, the air conditioner, and to Kylan White, the electrician, for coming in on the weekend and helping us get this show ready to deliver to you. So they're great guys, and I want to give a shout out to them right now. I also would be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to my doctor at the dermatology clinic, because that toxic reaction, I had a yeast infection, and it caused me to break out all over. I ended up with an overgrowth of yeast, and the zinc and them were competing, is what he said. In fact, I'm doing a show with him next month. Dr. Watley stayed late to 5:30 to see me after every patient left, and I was not his patient. So thank you, Dr. Watley, for helping me get back to 99.9% of where I was 5 months ago. I happened to be sitting in a restaurant with a girlfriend of mine's birthday brunch at Solu on Perkins Road. And someone came up to me, a young man, and said, "Are you Dianne Andrews?" I said, "Yes, I am." And he said, "I just want to thank you for inspiring us, and I would like to take a selfie with you." And I said, "I'm no celebrity." And he said, "You are to us in Angola." I said, "Oh, really? What were you in Angola for?" And he told me it was for committing a murder that he didn't do. I'm not going to give you a lot of details, but it was 2 guys who were in LSU Eunice, freshmen in college there. They frequented a convenience store very close to them. On March 4th, 2003, these 2 young men, one 19, one 23, the 19-year-old was a 4.0 student. The 23-year-old had had a little trouble, not much, petty robbery once, with the law. But one of them went inside the store with a gun. The other one did not know he was inside the store with a gun. And he killed a man brutally. He shot him in the head for less than $70. So when you hear this story of one of the men is going to be with me today, I want you to think, is it the 4.0 student at 19, or is it the one who had had trouble with the law before? Come on back to Dianne Andrews in black and white. I think you'll find this journey, this story, worth your while. The man sitting next to me is one of the men I had told you. He is the 23-year-old that had the petty theft in his record. He was sitting in the car in a convenience store that they went to almost every day. The 19-year-old, his name was Guillory, Joseph Guillory, who is still in Angola. He went in with a gun without the knowledge of my guest. He shot this man in the head with his wife in the bedroom sleeping. It was a house built to the convenience store. So I was very leery, and Justin will tell you this. I'm saying, you didn't see a gun. He didn't act differently when he came out. You didn't hear anything. And I said, you know, most convenience stores have glass doors. You saw nothing. You didn't see him fall over. You didn't see any blood on him. And I'll ask you again today. Answer those questions for me, Justin. Thanks for being on Dianne Andrews in black and white.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome. I think it's a great story.
I appreciate it.
Tell me all the things I just asked, like you tell me the story.
Yeah, sure. So
one day, it was Fat Tuesday, 2003, and we decided to go to Lafayette, Louisiana, maybe try to join some festivities and whatnot. And we stopped by a local convenience
Because you were living
store.
in Eunice.
Yeah, I was living in Eunice.
At
Louisiana.
LSU Eunice,
we were
yeah.
going to LSUE. I was majoring in business management at the time.
He also, business?
Yes. And we stopped by a local convenience store. I stayed in the vehicle. He went inside momentarily, it wasn't long. And
How long was he gone?
2 or 3 minutes.
That's it?
Typically how long it would take for someone to go in the store and buy something.
Do you know what he went to buy? Did he say, I need to stop here and get something? Did he
He
say?
went to get some cigars.
Cigars.
Yeah. So it was in and out. Again, it wasn't unusual because it didn't take long to
Right.
go in or come out. Wasn't a big deal. And then he got in the vehicle and we left. And as we were leaving, another vehicle was pulling in. And when the gentleman from that vehicle went inside and obviously saw what happened and then identified the vehicle.
Did he have a
that
cigar when he came back? Did he have cigars with him? Did he actually
Yes.
get the cigars?
Yes.
So you weren't suspicious. You saw no gun.
No.
Where was the gun?
Apparently on his person when he got out of the vehicle. And then at some point, he managed to stick the gun in between the middle console. So the barrel was facing towards me when it was found.
And that person that drove in that car walked into a traumatic situation that they will never forget, all right? The
Absolutely.
blood. And his wife came out, I understand,
Yeah, the
to see her
gentleman woke
husband.
the wife up, I
Yeah.
believe.
Yes.
And then obviously the wife came out to a horrific situation.
That's something that guy will never forget. And of course, the female will never forget. His name was Kelsey Lejeune,
Yes,
is
ma'am.
how he pronounced it. Dead in the head. He was shot in the head. One time,
Twice.
twice in the head. So he meant to kill him. There's no question about that because he knew who he was. But going in there, he had to know who he was. He knew the guy knew who he was.
Yeah, we
I'm
went
not
by
getting
that
it.
store pretty often. We went by that store because it was in the neighborhood, so probably 4, 5 times a week.
For less than $70. This is amazing. So they called the police. How long did it take the police to catch you before you got to Lafayette?
When we
Probably,
got
right?
to the next town. Yeah.
And so you knew nothing. Tell me how you felt when the police comes in. What do they say? What do they do?
So the police were at the gas station. They surrounded us. He had left out of the car and went inside and came out. I was still in the car, and the police came up to my window, guns drawn, and pulled me out of the vehicle and handcuffed me. And then he came out. They did the same to him. And they put us in separate vehicles and didn't explain what was happening. I had no idea what was going on. And they were not nice about it, let me tell you. And I was in the vehicle probably 15 to 20 minutes.
In the car?
Yes, ma'am. Before another officer came.
It was one guy.
It was several officers, but one officer came, and it wasn't an officer who the vehicle belonged to. And he said, "What happened?" And I was just confused. I was
You
like,
still didn't know there was a murder.
absolutely not. And he said, "Wherever you guys just came from, you left a dead body." That was his words. And I just,
You knew the man, so what'd you say?
but we
Mr.
only
Kelsey
came from one
dead?
place.
Huh?
We only came from one place.
Right. But
Right.
y'all saw this man. He knew you by name, right?
Sure.
Y'all were there all the time.
Yeah, I
Little
grew up-
convenience store in a small town.
I
Yeah.
grew up going to that store.
You did?
Yeah.
So you've been knowing him since you were a little boy. Because Mr. Guillory, I think, was from Baton Rouge, right? He was adopted into your family, so you knew him, right?
Yes. And the officer said, "Wherever you guys just came from, you left a dead body." And I was like, "That's impossible." In my mind, it felt like a nightmare.
It was a nightmare.
It felt unreal. And they brought us to the local police station, and eventually set us down side by side, still handcuffed and whatnot, in front of, I guess, the police chief.
Did you ever just look at him and say, "Hey, did you kill that man?"
No, I mean, we both had the same look that I had. Of
He acted like he
disbelief.
didn't know what happened.
Of course not.
But there was no car between. You saw the next car go in and passed you when you were leaving.
Yes, but still, I just did
Yeah,
not
never thought of
believe
murder, that he would
that
murder someone.
Even I just still didn't believe it. And
But
so
didn't you, I think one time we talked, you said the gun, they found the gun in a console, the old cars,
It's an
the
old car, so
console,
the console goes down. So it's like you can kind of, well, obviously, just kind of squeeze it in, right? It wasn't. obviously wasn't pulled all the way down and whatnot.
Right. So they saw the gun. They retrieved the gun that
But when
day.
they searched the vehicle,
Yeah.
they found the gun. Yeah.
That same night, of course.
Yes.
They got.
Right.
So let's.
Which I didn't find out about what was found in the vehicle
Of
until some
course.
time later with attorneys and all that stuff there.
So how long? You never got out from that day on, right?
Never.
There was no bail.
No, there was no bail.
So let's skip to the trial. Separate trials,
Yes.
different lawyers
Yes.
for separate trials. At that time, did you know that he had said you did it?
I had no idea.
But you were saying he had to do it?
I wasn't saying anything because I couldn't say he did it because I wasn't in the store.
Yeah.
Now, there may have
But they
been,
found the gun in y'all's
True.
car.
True. And they found the money on his person.
$70, $60-some.
And they found, blood splatter on his clothes. And they found his footprints in the store. They found all of that. And even though
But didn't he say he jumped over the counter? Didn't he try to act like both of y'all were in there, you did the shooting, and he jumped over to get the money?
I'm not exactly sure who came up with that scenario, whether it was him or his attorney,
lawyer
or the
may
district
have.
attorney.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Right.
I just know when I went to trial, they said that I was the one that went in there, and the reason that went in there and shot the man, and the reason that I didn't have any evidence that I shot him is because he was the one that actually jumped over, got the money, and that's why his footprints was there. That's why he had blood on his clothes.
But
That's why all of that.
they're saying it's two people in there. There was only one set of footprints.
Yes.
But they're saying it's two people in there, you and him.
Yes.
Just to say you had to go to jail too.
Yes. So in Louisiana, we have a law called a principal law.
Principal?
Principal. And so principal is basically you don't have to commit the murder. All we have to do is prove that you knew about it. And then you get the same amount of time that person gets.
That's not in every state. That
No,
law, do
and
you know?
states have it's set up differently in different states.
So if you knew it, you're an accomplice, is what they're saying in this
Right.
principal law.
Yes.
So they're assuming you had to know, or you had. And I'm going to tell you, when you first told me, it was very hard for me to believe this man just shot somebody twice in the head at 19, who had never done anything to be, any trouble before,
Sure.
and not act differently.
Yeah.
Did he come in? Hey man, let's go.
Things, I have asked myself that question for a long time. How did I miss it? That was one of the things that
It obviously
I
wasn't that
replayed-
obvious,
I
though.
replayed in my mind. Now, mind you, I wasn't the man then that I am today.
Of course.
I didn't have the level of discernment or
Right.
education or wherewithal. I just wasn't that person. But nevertheless, I've played 1,000 times.
What did your lawyer tell you? Did he believe you? Would you have a public defender?
I had several lawyers.
In the beginning, I'm talking
Yes.
about. You have public defenders?
I ended up with the public defender.
Because it gets expensive. You're 19. You didn't come from a lot of
and we
money.
depleted all our funds, and my attorney wouldn't take us any further.
Did he believe you think?
I think at first he didn't. And then he asked me about, a lot of different questions, and they persist pretty hard.
Yeah.
I think eventually he did, but I think he knew what he was up against was more than he could handle. And
But the kind of lawyer you needed, you could not afford.
I could not afford, and I ended up with public defenders out of Shreveport.
Yeah.
And I didn't know about this, but their primary goal is to keep people off death row.
Locked up in death row?
To keep people off death row.
Off.
So when I didn't get the death penalty, although I was convicted, to them it was a win.
Oh, okay.
But to me it was not.
Of course not. Now let's skip a little. How long were you there, and then let's go into your time in prison and how you changed your life. I mean, you went from AD, you got an AD, associate's degree, to a BA, to a master's degree while you were 13 years before you were said to be innocent by Mr. Guillory in the prison. He finally confessed.
Yes.
That was a very moving moment, it seems like, when you told me. But you were also a model prisoner because you were majoring in religion, Christianity. What were the
Theology.
majors? Theology.
Yes.
And what was he doing? Doing drugs, being a typical bad prisoner.
He wasn't majoring in theology.
That's right, to say the least, right? So one day he just saw you when you had been there 13 years. You saw him where? In the cafeteria?
So I would see him periodically, but Angola is a very big place.
Right, I've been there with Mr. Eric Lane to the
Yeah,
rodeo.
it's
In fact, I've
18,000
given out
acres.
food to the president. He gives peanuts and pink hats.
Right.
Eric later, I do a show with him later.
So
Yeah.
there's several different, housing facilities there, and he was typically not in the same housing facility. And every so often, when things aligned, I would see him, but it was,
You never spoke.
we hardly ever spoke, right? I mean, what was there to talk about
Nothing.
at that point,
Right.
And I didn't want to.
I think I may have wanted to go beat his,
Well,
what.
we've had some clashes,
Yeah.
early on. But as I begin to move forward in my incarceration, it's you can sing the song of freedom, and it sounds like a lot of songs that people sing.
What I was sewing, they were doing a sewing project in a maximum security prison. It's a documentary about it, and they were teaching the people on death row to sew, and it gave them such a purpose. But one guy said, everybody in here is innocent. Everybody says they're innocent, was what
Right.
he said,
Yeah.
whether you are or not.
Well, believe it or not, that when you're going through the court system, a lot of people say they're innocent.
Yeah,
But behind the wall,
They tell the
most
truth.
people don't mind telling you the truth.
unless they're
right?
trying to get out of there.
Right. And but the thing is that I couldn't continue to sing the song of freedom because it sounded like everybody else's.
Right.
So I had to make a decision that instead of telling people that I didn't belong there, I had to start living like I didn't. Because it made more of an impact.
Right.
And so, as something that I started to see early on, even before I got to Angola, and I went to prison with a high school education. That was it. I graduated from high school and I had a semester of college, if that.
Right.
And what I quickly noticed is that I was one of the smartest people there
In the prison.
in the parish prison. that I
Parish
was
prison.
In. Yeah,
How long were you there, did you say?
3.5 years
3.5 years before they sent you to
before
Angola,
they sent me to Angola.
which is the largest federal prison in the country, I think.
It's
Angola.
not a state.
It is a state facility, largest
yeah, but
in the
it
country.
is the
isn't it?
largest as far as land mass. is
Yeah, it's
concerned.
beautiful up there, though. It's beautiful on the Mississippi River. The
Yeah.
rodeo is something else to see.
Yeah, I mean it's aesthetically it's beautiful.
It is, but not.
Internally,
Not if you're in there.
it's a very ugly place.
Yes, I bet.
But nevertheless, I started to kind of tap into some things early on that kind of carried me through. And then when I got to Angola and kind of saw that whole setup, I just had to make some serious decisions of how I wanted to live my life. Because I
Did
didn't
you
want to wake
think
up.
in your heart that you would ever get out, or did you think, I'm going to be here forever?
So 99% of the time, I always felt like my day would come.
Oh, really? Okay.
There was always that 1% sometimes
Of course.
that just makes you say, what if it doesn't?
Yes.
And I had that moment
Yeah.
very vividly, and I was at Camp J, which is a very
Camp J?
Camp J. Camp J is where they house all of the prisoners who cannot live in population with anybody else.
They're pretty bad. These
pretty
are the worst of the worst.
Yeah, pretty dangerous. And I was there, and I had a moment.
They put you in there?
Yeah.
Why?
I was there because when I got to Angola, and you got to go to the field. You go into the field and you pick crops and
Yeah.
you cut grass with a swing blade and all of that. And I had got hurt and had to go to the hospital, the internal hospital there, and I being brand new, and I got into it with a security officer who was being very disrespectful. And I'm kind of big on respect, and I try
Yeah.
to give everybody that.
Right.
And obviously, I didn't understand the world that I was in.
Right.
And I ended up getting sent to Camp J the first week
Did you
that I
hit
got
him?
there. No,
Did you hit him?
Absolutely not.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm not crazy.
Yeah, okay.
No.
Yeah.
But I said some choice words
Okay.
in response to what that individual said to me.
Mm-hmm.
In hindsight, that wasn't a great decision,
Right.
but nevertheless,
But to give them a little credit, that he does think he's dealing with a murderer, right?
sure.
Yeah. But I don't know what he said, so I
Yeah.
mean, you don't want to say here what, he was pretty rude.
Yeah, it was
But-
absolutely rude.
So you made a decision and you went on and went all the way to your master's and you were going out to speak, I think, for Angola, weren't you?
Yeah. So let me tell you what my decision was. So I was on my way to the child hall to get something to eat, and I had that 1% kicked in. And I said, that voice is like, you're going to die here,
Yeah.
right? But then the decision
It
at
got
that
to be
point,
hard to remain
oh,
positive in that situation.
it was hard. I mean, I had no friends. I didn't know anyone, and I remember saying to myself that even if I die here, I know there's a better place after I'm gone. Right?
You believed in God.
I did.
Did you
And
believe in
so
God before?
I did believe in God before, but
But you were 19.
yeah, I mean, it was a very surface level of
Yes.
belief, whatever that
Yes.
is. But at that moment, I was like, I may not be able to control whether I die in this place.
Yeah.
But I can control where I go afterwards.
Right.
And that's when I started to kind of make some better decisions in my life.
Are you a minister now, ordained, or do you preach anywhere? Or?
So I don't preach anywhere. I did a lot of preaching when I was in Angola.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So did you teach church there at Angola? Because I know a lot of people who come in from the outside and speak. In fact, I had thought about doing it. I mentioned this to you, but I have claustrophobia. When they shut the door, I would probably scream, and fall out, and they'd have to take me out anyway. But let's go back to the 13th year in there, because the bigger issue that we haven't even touched on yet is it took him 7 years to get out after Mr. Guillory said that he confessed that he did it, and it took 7 years for him to get out. He stayed in jail 20 years in Angola. So when you saw him that day, did he just come up to you, or you all were sitting somewhere? What made him, do you know, come to you and say, man, I'm about to tell the truth?
So when I saw him that day, I had church service.
You had led.
Yes.
And he was there.
And he was there. And it was a regular service. It was a good service. And later on that day, I just walked up to him. And I was like, how you doing? And he just broke down crying, And, he just began to apologize profusely for what had happened. And, he basically said, look, my life is a mess, but I don't want it to be messy in this area anymore. Mm-hmm. It mattered to him.
At least he had one breakthrough.
Yeah, he was like, look, I see the things that you're doing. And, I can appreciate the people that you're trying to help, because I facilitated classes and I was doing all these different things.
Yeah.
And helping with all these different programs. And he basically was like, I want to make this right. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what I need to do.
Does anybody ever, he's got what, 60 years in life or whatever, however you say that?
Yeah, he has life without parole.
Without parole, that's what I was going to ask. Okay, so he tells you that, then how does the process start to try to get you out of there?
So the process starts with getting him to write an affidavit, sign an affidavit, which we did, and we got it notarized, and then I needed an attorney. Well, before I even got to an attorney, I filed it into the court system, pro se, which means that, typically most of us in prison don't have attorneys, so we filed it on our own, and I filed it very hopeful that finally, after all these years, this is what I've been saying is finally lining up with what he's saying, and I started doing my dance.
Yeah, you think I'm going to get out of here soon.
This is it, and one court after another just denied. Basically, the consensus was...
Did they give a reason?
Yeah, basically the two reasons. One, they're saying that it's just too late. He should have did it sooner before I got convicted. And the other reason from one of the courts was that his statements was inconsistent with what he said when he went to prison.
Of course. He said you did it.
Right. And so my rebuttal to that was, well, when in the beginning he said he didn't do it and you didn't believe him, so you sent him to prison. Now he's saying he did do it and you're still saying you don't believe him.
Right.
And it's
a no-win for you, is what it was.
You have to pick one.
Yeah.
You can't pick it when it's convenient for you.
Right.
And so I got denied in every court I walked in with that. And, my balloon was deflated, and lifers get one opportunity to go in front of the clemency board after 15 years. And my time had come. And so I said, I'm going to file. I'm going to file actual innocence.
Yeah.
And every single person told me not to do that.
Every lawyer.
Most of every person that I know said that is not a great idea. Because when you go in front of those boards, they expect you to be remorseful for the things that
I'm
you've
sorry.
done.
Throw yourself in their mercy so they can forgive you.
And then stand on your accomplishments.
Right.
And although
Would that have been possible, let's say, if he had not confessed and you were doing such great work, do you think you could have tried to get a pardon, even though it says no pardon? If it's no pardon, forget about it, never.
right, you get an opportunity at it. Everyone does with a life sentence.
Oh, they
Gets
do?
an opportunity
Oh,
at it
okay.
after 15 years.
That's what yours was, you're saying. Okay, that was
Yes.
the time.
And so my 15 years had came up to get my shot at it.
Yeah. And the guy just, Mr. Guillory, had confessed.
He had already
so
confessed.
you thought,
a
this is
couple
it,
of
I'm
years-
out of here, I'm
He
walking
con-
out after the
He
hearing.
confessed years earlier.
2 years, yeah.
Yeah. And so when I went in front of the board, no one goes in front of the board and says they're innocent. Because no one wants to admit that we incarcerate.
Even though
innocent
some
people.
may be. They're not going to say
Even though
it.
some may be.
They're not going to
They're
say
not
it.
going to say it. They're going to go
They're
in
scared.
there, of course. Because, I mean,
So when you said it, it made them upset.
it didn't make the board upset because I had the affidavit. We had a video deposition, him saying it. If you go throughout my entire court proceedings,
Yeah.
my statements never changed. My confession of innocence never changed.
Right.
The evidence never. There's so much, right? And so when I had one of the best attorneys in the state at the time who were doing clemencies, and he told me, he said, I'll take your case, but if you go in there and confess to it. He said, if you go in there and you confess to it, based on everything that you've done, I believe that we can get you out.
And you still did not want that on your record.
No, absolutely not.
Right. Ooh,
My words to him was, I appreciate it, but I would die in this place innocent before I walk out living like I'm guilty.
Come on back to us next week and let's hear about Justin and his daughter, who was 1 year old when he went into Angola, and see how he communicates with her now and see what's happening with his life now, how he's turned, again, tragedy into triumph. Come on back to Dianne Andrews in Black and White next week. Bye-bye. Have a wonderful next week.
They thought all of that was silly, ridiculous, a waste of time. They didn't want that's why they were so successful. That's why they got away.
I've made a living in very dangerous.
This is really an integrated Blue society.
Dianne Andrews in Black and White.